The Lost Weekend is one of Billy Wilder's most successful awards films ever. Nominated for 7 Oscars, winning 4, including Best Picture. We're going to get into why it was so acclaimed this week on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 47 of the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Yes, Billy Wilder is back on the podcast, but this time it wasn't at my suggestion. It was in fact at the suggestion of my co-host, Harry Bailey. How are you doing today, Harry?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's one of the few big Billy Wilder films that I hadn't seen before, so I thought, hey, good excuse to get this one out of the way. It's a Best Picture winner. The first film to win Best Picture and to win the Grand Prix at Cannes. Other than that, there was Marty, which is also class, and Parasite, which is also class. But yeah, The Lost Weekend, I liked it. Spoiler-free review, I liked it. I definitely have not seen many Ray Milland movies, and I think he's good in this, definitely. It's probably not one of Wilder's wittiest movies, or certainly not his funniest, but it's not quite his wittiest. It's definitely quite a salty movie. Obviously, it was aimed at someone in particular, and it's basically Wilder holding a mirror up to how selfish alcoholism can be as a disease, not just to the person who is suffering it, but to the people around said person. And yeah, as I said, it was Billy Wilder basically holding a mirror up to his friend to say this is basically what we went through when we made that fantastic movie Double Indemnity together. What about you, Shane?
Yeah, I really liked this the first time I saw it, and I really like it now. It's based on a novel by a guy called Charles R. Jackson, and in that novel, by the way, there's like kind of a deeper homoerotic subtext. So the character is kind of self hating the fact that he is a closeted gay guy. That's kind of pretty much entirely taken out of the film itself, because we're obviously in the Hays Code period, so they didn't really want to go down that route. Plus, I think Wilder just wanted to focus mainly on alcoholism part of it, and like why, especially on how that kind of affects the people around the main character as well. So there's all that stuff going on. But yeah, it was nominated for 7 Oscars, and it won 4 Best Picture, obviously Best Director for Billy Wilder. Ray Milland, who he's been in some great films. He was in a previous Billy Wilder film called The Major and the Minor with Ginger Rogers. It's a really funny rom-com. And he's also in Dial M for Murder, which is one of my favourite Hitchcock films.
That's the first time I saw him anyway.
Yeah, he's the guy who puts the whole plan in motion and maybe is a bit of a wrong'un, but yeah. And then also won Best Adapted Screenplay by Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett, based on the aforementioned Charles R. Jackson novel. And as you said, it was shared the first ever Grand Prix award at the very first Cannes Film Festival. So like it has a lot of kind of acclaim and a lot of success from an awards point of view. I don't think Wilder, he wasn't someone who was like necessarily he didn't make it for obviously awards, but it is the kind of the picture that would kind of put him on the map as like, this guy now has become a heavyweight director. He's kind of graduated to that upper echelon of kind of big name directors, writer directors, etc. So yeah, you've already got your kind of spoiler for your review, but is there anything else you wanted to mention before we dive in?
Yeah, shout out Miklos Rosa.
Yeah,
score on point yet again from that guy. He's done the score for a few films that we've talked about on the podcast. The aforementioned Double Indemnity. He did what is the second best part of the movie Spellbound, the score. Obviously Salvador Dali on top. But Miklos Rosa, very acclaimed, very well respected composer in film history. He did a lot of big scores, but it's so good. I love the score in this movie. It's like literally like otherworldly. Like there's certain scenes where the score makes the drunken lead character almost feel like extraterrestrial. Like he doesn't feel human or something. Like he feels like removed from everything else in the room because of how like almost science fiction-y the score kind of gets at some points. It's love the score of this movie. Miklos Rosa, what a guy.
Yeah, he's done some great work. Yeah, this is right up there with one of the best scores he's done that we've covered in the podcast. So yeah, I think without further ado, we'll get into the action. We see a wide establishing shot of New York City, so obviously that's just to let us know we are in the Big Apple. And then we pan to an apartment window, and there's a bottle of whiskey hanging from a string, kind of just dangling
Hmm.
there. So that's there. And then we can kind of
Similar
see,
opening shot to Psycho.
yeah, and rope as I say as well, like rope, not
Hmm.
the like we can kind of see, just the kind of camera just kind of pans over to a window, um, and then we move inside the apartment at one point. Kind of get that little dangle of what's about to happen. So we see a guy in the apartment. We're still outside, but we can see a guy in the apartment, and it turns out it's a guy called Don Birnam. He's a writer, and yeah, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly that this guy is in recovery. He is a recovering alcoholic, and his brother Wick is telling him to pack extra shorts for the farm. They're going on a trip together. They're just going kind of on a weekend getaway to cheer Don up because he's been down in the dumps. He hasn't had a drink for about 10 days, so he's doing
Hmm.
he's doing better. He's on the mend. He's kind of doing what he needs to do to kind of just get that stuff out of his system and kind of just hopefully on the path to recovery. Don wants to bring his typewriter because he wants to try and at least get some work done, try and have it be kind of a productive getaway. So he asks Wick to go. He says it's in my wardrobe, and once Wick goes in the bedroom, he makes a beeline for the window. He tries to kind of
Hmm.
take the whiskey from the piece of string. So obviously, yeah, it's pretty obvious he is having some withdrawal symptoms. He just can't stop thinking about alcohol. He can't stop thinking about drink. He needs a drink, basically. Um, so Don kind of puts it back once Wick kind of turns around and says it's actually not there. So he puts it back so it's still there. And then he kind of starts to act kind of belligerent. He says that people are going to be talking about him behind his back.
Hmm.
Because obviously it's kind of the word has gotten out that he is in recovery, that he has a problem with drink. So then his partner Helen arrives, and she gives him a bunch of books and cigarettes that she's bought from. Quite a nice gesture, obviously. She says that she's going to go to a Brahms concert that evening by herself. And then Don just hears this and he spots an opportunity. So he
Hmm.
says, Why don't we take the later train instead of going at 3:15? Why don't we go at 6:30? And Wick, you can go with Helen to this concert." And obviously they kind of smell a rat. They're like, "Well, we can't leave you on your
Yeah.
own." But he's like, "Ah," and then he just kind of starts acting even more belligerent, even more rude. He's like, "Listen, you can't stop babying me, treating me like a child. I need to be able to kind of live on my own. I need to be able to you need to be able to trust me." So basically, he guilts them into agreeing to go along with this plan against obviously their better instincts. So they reluctantly then agree to go, and Wick tells Helen that Don's broke. He's not going to be able to buy any drink anyway, so we don't kind of need to worry from that point of view. Um,
Hmm.
actually, I skipped over the part
Yeah,
where he
he
found
he puts the door on the latch then when they leave, because as you said, he basically guilts them into going to this concert, and he then starts scouring around the apartment, looking in various hiding places, in vents, behind books, in all sorts of places, in the Hoover for a drink. He can't find one, because his brother had taken the one that was outside the window and poured it down the sink. But yeah, the cleaner then tries to get in, and because the door's on the latch, she can't quite. And he says, "Oh, come back on Monday, come back on Monday." And she's like, "Oh, well, did your brother leave my money out at least?" And he asks her, "Oh, where would he have left it?" He goes and gets the money and then lies to her and says that his brother Wick forgot to leave the money out. So now he has money for alcohol. Because, yeah, we come to learn as well that this guy has pawned off and given away a lot of his belongings in the past for credit and for alcohol. And, yeah, he heads down to Nat's bar where instantly he's met with the reception of sorry, first of all he goes to the liquor store where he's met with the reception of, "Your brother said that I can't give you any more drink on credit." And he says, "Well, I have money actually." And he buys two of the cheapest bottles of rye that they have. He then also buys a couple of apples to put on top of the brown paper bag so he doesn't look as conspicuous. And then he goes to the bar where again the barman is like, "Listen, I am not giving you any more free drink. We don't do credit. get out, and he's like, I actually have money, and he manages to get a shot off him, and again, you can just tell the characters around him, it's their profession, so they gotta sell him the drink, I guess, but no one is like happy to give this man drink, because you can tell that he's been at this for years, and we find that he has literally been at this for years now.
Yeah, because even when he bought those 2 bottles in the grocery store, one of the neighbours that he bumps into, kind of an older woman, she says that's that nice man who drinks behind his back. So like it's an open secret at this point. And obviously back then as well, it would have been an even bigger source of shame for the family, because it's not the kind of thing that was spoken about as much or acknowledged as much as it would be now. But yeah, Don then giddily tells Nat, the barman, about his plan. So he says, I'm going to stash a bottle in Wick's suitcase. I'm going to let Wick find a bottle. That way he thinks, okay, right, I found the bottle. I don't need to worry anymore. And I'm actually going to stash the other bottle in Wick's suitcase, because that's the last place he would look. And then once we get down there to the farmhouse, I'm going to stash it away. I might not even drink it. I just need to know that it's there. Like, that's obviously a common thing that a lot of drinkers say, is that they just kind of need to know that it's there, accessible if and when they need it. And then we see a woman
also
walk in.
Another great bit of writing as well from Wilder, just to encapsulate the whole thing, where when he lifts the shot, obviously the little ring that's left behind, Nat goes to wipe it away, and he says, don't let me have my vicious circle, which is obviously a reference to alcoholism.
Yeah, clever little line. So we see a woman walk in, Gloria. She starts flirting with Don. Obviously, they know each other quite a bit. Seems they've kind of flirted back and forth, and they've kind of gone through this whole rigmarole a bunch of times. I think it's implied that she's a working woman. So I think that's kind of the subtext there. Maybe not even subtext, maybe just text. But yeah, it's pretty interesting, because she's quite a sympathetic character, which obviously wouldn't necessarily have been treated that way by a lot of scripts at the time. But yeah, then Don kind of leads her on a little bit. He's kind of playing along, even though he has no intention of actually kind of.
I mean, he's with Helen.
Yeah.
Let's acknowledge that. Basically, all of this flirting that's going on is not cool, and the barman is also quite pissed about the whole thing.
Yeah.
But she is clearly under some impression as well that whatever relationship that Don and Helen have isn't nearly as serious as it actually is. Yeah. Also, it's worth noting he told the barman to let him know when it was 5:45, so that he could sneak back home, pretend to be sober, and then get the train with his brother.
Yeah, so Don gives a whole monologue to Nat, the barman, about just how powerful he feels when he has a drink. He kind of feels superhuman. He feels he can kind of do anything. And he says he knows it's destroying his health, but he doesn't care. So then we cut back to Wick and Helen. They're at the apartment, and they obviously have found out. They realise at this stage that Don has gone AWOL. He's not there. And Wick says, I don't care anymore. I don't care what happens to him. Like, I've tried so many times for so many years now to help him, and he doesn't want to help. And that's a big theme of this film, like, of he's not wrong. Don is not a guy who actually wants help. Like, people are going out of their way time after time after time to help him, and he just throws it back in their face, and he does some really unlikable things. So I think it's pretty interesting that the film goes there as well. Helen, obviously, she kind of tries to defend him, and she says he's a sick man. But Wick says he's a hopeless alcoholic. He doesn't care anymore. So we cut back to Don.
He also implies as well that if he was to die, that it wouldn't be a bad thing anymore, because it would relieve a lot of people of a lot of heartache.
Yeah, so it's
is pretty heavy stuff to come from his own brother.
Yeah, 100%. So we cut back to Don at the bar, at Nat's bar, and he panics, and he gets, again, quite rude and belligerent when he realises that it's actually 6:10 now. The train is meant to be at 6:30, so like they're cutting it quite fine. Actually, it might be a little later than 6:10, but yeah. He's rude to Nat. He says, "Why didn't you let me know?" And Nat says, "What do you think I've been trying to do for the last 20 minutes?" Like, so.
Yeah.
Don's just in his own world. Like, he has his drink, and that's it. Like, it's just him and his drink. So he runs home, and And then he kind of hears Helen and Wick come downstairs, so he kind of hides a little bit further down. And when he sees them leave, then he runs backstairs, right back upstairs, stashes one of the bottles in the chandelier, and then he just opens the other one and he starts to drink, and he's just delirious at this point. Like he's in his element. He has everything he wants. He wants at this point in time.
Another example as well of where the score is just really, really, really good. But yeah, he then the next day, after again drinking himself to unconsciousness, he goes to the bar, to Nat's bar the following day, and he finds out from Nat that Helen had gone looking for him and couldn't find him. And he also implies as well, because Nat is definitely a bit of a straight-laced character. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's literally like, she also did not seem like she thought you were here. She was clearly doing a search for you. Like this was clearly not the first place that she went to try and find you. She clearly cares about you. But in this moment, he also realizes that he only drank one of his 2 bottles last night of rye. Gloria comes in and flirts with him again, and then a man actually comes in looking for Gloria. As you said, it's implied that that's her profession, but yeah, she just fobs him off because she clearly actually has eyes for Don, and Don again basically agrees to going out with her later on. But once he realizes that he only drank one of his bottles of rye, that's now all that he's thinking about, and he rambles then about this novel that he wants to write about himself called The Bottle to Nat, because he just keeps having shots then in the bar. And basically he starts telling the backstory, because this novel, The Bottle, is not necessarily an autobiography, more so just a tale of his alcoholism. And it all started at the matinee of this show, where he went to see a stage show, and all the characters in the show were all having a drink, and he went from like slight jealousy to full blown the sweats to
Withdrawal symptoms.
hallucinating that the actors were a bunch of trench coats with bottles of rye in their pockets, because he realizes, oh yeah, he actually does in fact have a bottle of rye in his pocket in the cloakroom.
Yeah, so he leaves like after the first act, basically, like he quite early into the show.
He leaves like an hour in, but it's still only like the first act.
Exactly. So he goes downstairs to the cloakroom, and he's like, "Give me my jacket." But it turns out that his ticket got swapped with someone who was sitting beside him, because the guy just flat refuses to give him his jacket, because like, that's not my jacket.
There's got to be regulations.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to have regulations.
Yeah, so the guy flat refuses. So Don, he's full on withdrawal mode at this point. He doesn't even go back to watch the rest of the show. He just sits on the steps of this theatre until the show's over,
dreaming of his bottle of whiskey.
Yeah, and straight away he heads back over to the cloakroom. Everyone else gets their jackets, and then like they're the last 2. Him and Helen are the last 2. He doesn't know Helen at this point, obviously. But when he looks over, again, acts quite rude, not for the first time, not for the last time, towards Helen. He's like, "What took you so long?" Then he kind of realizes he's being a dickhead, so he tries to make up for it, and gets to talking. She says that like, "I work for Time magazine," and he's like, "Okay, yeah, I'm a writer too. Problem is, I never finish anything." So like, it's implied that he does have talent, but he just can't get his ducks in a row, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they start to get along, and they kind of, they're flirting a little bit, but then she invites him to go to a party that she's going to that night, but he's like, "Oh no, I have to go and meet a friend on the other side of town." Basically, he just wants to be alone with his bottle. But then, as he turns to leave, the whiskey falls out of his pocket and smashes on the ground. And for a second, he's like flummoxed, but then he kind of plays it cool. He's like, "Oh yeah, I bought that for my friend. He's kind of having a bit of a hard time lately." So then he's like, "Actually, where does it say that cocktail party was again?" So he's like, "Maybe I will come along with you after all, because that's free drink, and his bottle of whiskey is just smashed on the ground. So this is the next best option."
Yeah, and then present day Don says that he actually then managed to go a couple of days without drinking, but then it came to meeting Helen's parents, and we flash back then, and he is sat unknowingly behind them in a hotel lobby. They're meant to be meeting for lunch, and he overhears The father in particular is saying how this guy clearly isn't good enough for their only daughter Helen. He hasn't got a job. He claims to be a writer. He hasn't written anything, and basically he's not good enough for their daughter. And the very defeated Don then goes over to the phone booth he had like a big present for them and everything. He goes over to the phone booth and he calls reception from the phone booth to tell Helen that he wasn't going to make it. He was running late, but he'd catch them later. We then find that he did not catch them later. He went straight back home, got absolutely locked, and his brother Wick found him. And Wick, basically, originally Wick doesn't really know what's happening, but then he realizes that basically he just caved. He had one drink because he thought he needed one drink to settle the nerves before he met the parents, but he spiraled from there, got shit-faced, and ended up home. So Wick says that he will send a message for him on his behalf, basically to try and cover for him. And as he's going over to send said message, Helen actually arrives. So Wick stuffs Dawn in the bathroom, hides the bottle under the bed, lets her in, and starts talking to her about how Dawn actually got a job in Philly, and he's rushing over to get an interview, and that it's a very exciting thing, but he just didn't have the time to stop and tell you because, obviously this guy's been out of work for a long time. We find out, so the promise of a job is amazing, and she isn't about to leave delighted, but at least he's covered for his brother, when all of a sudden the empty bottle just rolls out from under the bed, and she's like, what the hell is this? This is Don's bottle? And Wick is like, no. And basically Wick then tries to pretend that he's an alcoholic to cover again for his brother, and then Don can't take it anymore, and he comes out and basically confesses.
So he says that once I went to he said he calls it an institution. He says I went to an institution once, but it didn't take, basically rehab. So he just goes on about kind of how much of a fuck up he is and how much this has been kind of ruining his life and ruining his family's life. Helen says though that it's not fatal, you can be cured. But then he's like, the thing about it is, in college I was like the Hemingway of my year, of my class. Like I was the guy everyone expected to be the next big thing. My first little project didn't take, my second didn't take, and from there on he's just kind of ran out of ideas, and kind of partially as a consequence of his professional failures, and then there's other things as well, I'm sure, in his personal life. He just turned to the bottle. That's his way of kind of solace. That's his kind of way of just masking out the pain of all that stuff. And he says there's two.
Yeah, he said as well that it got so bad that he almost pawned off his typewriter, which is basically like his prized possession.
Yeah. And he says there's two Don Birnams. He says there's the drunk and the writer. And he says the drunk always convinces him things are going to be better with just a drink or two. And he says, actually, quite dark as well, he says on his 30th birthday, he actually considered shooting himself, but that he kind of chickened out. And he's 33 now, so obviously 3 years after the fact. He said he's 33 now and he's living off the kindness of his brother, who obviously just tried to pretend that he was the alcoholic. So he says Wick is like, he's too good, he's unfortunate just to be in a situation where he's my brother, and he doesn't even need the hassle. Like he's just kind of dragging Wick down along with him almost. And then Helen is like, oh, listen, I don't care about any of that, I'm going to help you get better. Don's like, that was 3 years ago. So then we kind of flash back forward to the present day, and Dawn tells Nat she stayed longer than most people would. She really has tried her best. And then he says, do you know what, I'm going to finally get down and I'm going to finally knuckle down tonight and start that novel. So he sits at his typewriter later that evening and he starts to writes the name of the novel by Don Birnam, and pretty much instantaneously runs out of ideas, doesn't know how to start, let alone finish. So he starts pacing around the room. He's looking around for this extra bottle that he knows is here somewhere. Starts ransacking his flat at this point. He just goes from 0 to 60 quite quickly. He gives up and he starts looking forlorn, and then he sees a card for a bar called Harry and Joe's, which is another bar. So he goes there and he's sitting there with a drink, and he realizes, shit, I don't have any money to pay for this thing. So he orders another gin vermouth, and then he goes into the bathroom because he has spotted a woman's purse sitting beside her. She's on a date with this guy, and they're kind of cuddling and getting close to each other. So he's like, okay, maybe this is actually a chance for me to just kind of casually steal this purse. So he reaches over on the sly, and he's quite successful at this because he manages to get it. He sidles into the bathroom where he can kind of take out the cash in piece. So
he meets Fred Toons, a cameo from Fred Toons,
nice,
who you may know from Remember the Night or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He's I don't know, he's a fairly prominent, he was a somewhat prominent African American actor at the time, but for me anyway, I just, as soon as I saw him, I was like, hey, I know that guy,
Leonardo DiCaprio.
But literally, I was like, oh, but Fred Toons is in this movie for a few seconds.
Yeah, so he takes the money out, and then he sees like a bunch of carnations, and he's like, I better just take one of those to kind of as a little thank you in his own warped way. He's like, I think he means well, but it's, first of all, it's like adding evidence that this bag was someone stole from this bag, and secondly, it's like, okay, the guy in the bathroom, Fred Toons, like, he knows that this guy was in here and he saw him taking a carnation, so wouldn't take much for someone to put two and two together. So he walks out of the washroom, and straight away it's like there's already a commotion because this woman has reported her bag is stolen. He then gets collared, and he's like, okay, I stole $10. And the lady doesn't want to call the cops. She's like, please just give me my money back in my bag. And of course then he's barred from the police, and he swears he's not a thief, but like his actions will just prove otherwise. So again, it's just a sign of, it's a really well done sign of he's so far in and he doesn't even understand the harm and the pain.
Yeah, he's at rock bottom at this point.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because he gets thrown out of the club, and as he's getting thrown out of the club, everyone in the club then starts singing a song slagging him, basically. Yeah. He gets thrown out, and then, like, as he's doing basically his walk of shame home, everyone who was outside the club who saw him got thrown out. They're all staring and pointing at him as well. So, yeah, it's very much rock bottom for him. And he gets home, and we see just how badly he's ransacked the place. And he then continues to ransack the place even further, trying to find this bottle. And then he just collapses onto his bed, defeated. But when he's looking at the ceiling, he can see the reflection, or the shadow, I should say, of the bottle in the lampshade. That's where he had hidden it earlier. And he climbs up, he takes it, and he drinks the whole bottle in one go. And again, just drinks himself to unconsciousness.
Yeah, the next morning then the phone rings, and he's obviously quite hungover. He's in a daze. So he thinks it's Helen, and he begs her to hang up. But he doesn't actually answer the phone, but he's just begging the phone to stop ringing. Please just hang up the phone, Helen. So he tries to pour another drink from the bottle, but it's empty. There's barely a drop in there. Same as the other bottle. He tries from both bottles. So he sees the typewriter, and then he just puts it in a suitcase, and it's pretty clear that he's intending to pawn it off for cash. So he's going out. He's going down to this place that he intends to sell it in, and he wonders if he's even going to get there because he's that hungover. He's that kind of, he has that much withdrawal symptoms that like he's wondering if he'll even actually make it there. So when he gets there though, the place is shut, and he's like, why is this place closed? It's Saturday, isn't it? He's told by kind of someone walking past, maybe someone died from this place. So he starts checking out a few other places. He goes and he's desperately trying to find other kind of places to pawn off this thing, wandering hopelessly around town, but they're all closed. And eventually he gets chatting to this guy who says, yeah, it's Yom Kippur today, obviously a Jewish holiday. And he says, why is the Irish place closed too? And he's like, well, they close out of respect. They close for Yom Kippur, and the Jewish place is closed for St. Patrick's Day. So it's a nice little, obviously, mark of respect between both communities. Don is just distraught, like his whole plan has gone out the window. So he goes back to Nat's bar. He's literally begging Nat for a drink. Nat's like, no, you can't pay. And I don't have much inclination to help you anyway because I know you're like in a bad way. Eventually though, Nat kind of caves because he's kind of just a nice guy. He's a bit of a pushover, really. So he eventually
Yeah.
says, "Look, I'll give you one. That's it." So he gives him a drink. Don again straight away downs it, and that's like
Yeah,
right.
starts begging then.
Yeah, and he starts begging again, and that's like, no, that's it. Get the fuck out of my bar. Go somewhere else. You're not coming back here. So Don stumbles out, and then he walks past Gloria's place where she had told him she lived earlier, and then he just goes up, bangs on her door, and obviously it stood her up the previous evening. So she opens the door and she is pissed at him because she quite clearly has quite the crush on Don. So she is, yeah, she's pretty pissed that he stood her up.
Yeah, he stood her up. So he goes to her house and begs her for money.
Yeah.
And before she can continue to berate him for standing her up at the date, because she said she got her hair done, she got an outfit and everything, he just kisses her. Yeah, this guy is literally willing to do anything to get alcohol.
Yeah.
So he kisses her, and she's like, "Fine, okay, how much do you need?" And he's like, "Either a 5 or a 10 will do." She goes in, she gets some sort of change and gives it to him. And then again, she starts talking, but he's not even listening. He turns around, he's gone because he's going to go and get drink. He sees a young girl coming up the stairs and kind of tries to avoid her, but he fails miserably and just falls down the stairs, taking a light with him as well. Stumbles down the stairs, and he wakes up. And yeah, he is in a bed in the drunk ward of the hospital. There are people who are clearly having really, really bad withdrawals all around him. And it is genuinely one of the scariest scenes, I think it's safe to say, in a Billy Wilder film. Because, yeah, just the noises and the performances from all the guys in this scene is really, really eerie. Because it's just so sad, basically, to see all of these people experiencing this. And, yeah, a nurse comes in and he basically fills in Don that it's kind of like a halfway between a prison and a hospital. You can't get out unless someone comes and picks you up, but Don refuses to give him his address or any sort of next of kin or anything. Again, Don tries to just walk out the front door, and the guy just grabs him and he's like, "Nah," and he brings him back. And the nurse is like, "Listen, you need to drink this medicine. Otherwise, the hallucinations you're going to have later are going to be really, really bad." That guy in the corner there, every night he doesn't take his medication, thinks that he's covered in beetles. And he says as well, it's always small animals that you hallucinate.
Yeah, so this guy called Bim, the nurse, he's a male nurse. He kind of starts to, partially he's trying to help Don by just like giving him practical advice, but it's also kind of bit of subtext where he actually kind of gets off on kind of taunting these guys, like about the fact that he kind of has power over them, basically. He says, "You're an alcoholic and we're going to get to know each other quite a lot since you're going to be in here quite a lot." He's like, yeah, once you get out, you're going to come straight back in. That's what happens with basically everyone that comes in here. Once you're in once, yeah, it's like you're already on the path, so it's like we're going to get to know each other quite well. That night then, Don hears another patient screaming in kind of agony and terror. So 2 doctors come in to restrain him, and then a doctor comes in then afterwards, and he takes off his coat jacket and he leaves it on the kind of the end of one of the beds.
Yeah.
And then Don sees his chance, so he kind of sneaks up, he grabs the doctor's coat, and he sneaks out with the jacket and he escapes. Meanwhile, we cut back to Helen, who's outside Don's apartment at this point. She's actually sleeping. Mm-hmm. She's obviously been here for quite a long time because she's literally asleep. Yeah. The milkman tiptoes upstairs so as not to wake her. And then the landlady of the house then comes up, she checks on her and she says, "Listen, we know all about Don. Like he's been living here for a while. Like it's not a secret to anyone that lives here."
Yeah.
She's like, "I could have kicked him out plenty of times, but I didn't because frankly, they always pay the rent on time, or his brother always pays the rent on time."
Yeah, his brother always pays his rent on time and seems like a lovely guy.
Yeah, so like we don't want to kind of rock the boat from that point of view either. Like, so Helen leaves. She goes look for Don, and obviously Don at this point has escaped the halfway house. So he waits outside a liquor store, and once the guy comes in and opens up shop,
Yeah,
obviously
literally.
literally first thing on the Sunday morning, I guess this would be, he goes in and literally Don straight away goes in straight after him, and he just
Hmm.
demands a quart of rye, and basically holding the place up like he has no weapon, but it's
Yeah,
pretty clear
he
that
literally
he's
refuses to pay and steals it, and
yeah,
he says to the guy, Don't take your jacket off, just give me the rye."
yeah. So it's pretty clear that like Don is willing to do something quite messed up, quite violent. Like if he does get his own way, and he will go through with it. Like
Hmm.
he's at that place.
Yeah, no, it's not good. But he gets home then with the bottle of rye, and the phone is ringing profusely, and he just begs for it to stop, and he sits down, and day then becomes night, because that's again part of what Dom was describing is the terrifying thing is he can just sit there and all of a sudden it's a new day, or the day just passes him by, and he sat there drinking, and then he sees a mouse burrowing through the wall, and then a bat starts flying around the room, and then the bat goes down to the mouse and really gruesomely just kills it, and there's blood everywhere on his wall, and he starts screaming like crazy, which wakes up the landlady. The landlady rushes out, and she then rushes back into her apartment and calls Helen. She's like, "You need to get up there right now." Helen comes. They can't get the door open because he has it on the latch, so they have to. Oh no, it's just locked, I think. So they have to get the handyman to come and try and get the door open. He goes to open the door, and Helen doesn't let them follow her in. She doesn't want this to be a big spectacle. She comes in and she finds him on the floor, basically babbling about a mouse and a bat and how it's always small animals. And he starts referring to Bim and Nat. And he's basically, to anyone who doesn't know what he's been up to, he's basically talking gibberish. She sees just how much of a fucking mess the place is. He clearly hasn't shaved or washed in days. And straight away, she's like, "Listen, don't worry. I'm going to look after you." She brings him in to his room. The next morning, he wakes up. He wakes up clean shaven and washed. Comes out, takes a slight glance at her asleep in the bed as well. The apartment is now spotless. And he grabs her leopard print coat from when they first met, and he heads out the front door. And he goes to the pawn shop. This wakes her up though, and she runs out in the piss and rain without a jacket, God love her. She doesn't catch him in time because he gets to the pawn shop and pawns off the jacket and comes out, and she's stood there soaking. And again, it's just like, wow, this guy is as selfish as alcoholism is on the person. It's so bad on the people around them, because she is stood out in the rain, absolutely getting lashed on, and he is just being so rude to her. She's like, "Listen, if it's about money, I don't care. I'll give you the money, but I want my jacket back. Like, that jacket means a lot to me." And he's like, "Why?" "Because it's the one that you wore when we first met." And she gets quite upset, and she goes into the pawn shop when he leaves, and she's like, "Listen, however much money you gave him for the jacket, I'll pay you for the jacket. That's my jacket. It's not his." And the guy who owns the pawn shop says, "Oh no, he didn't. He didn't take money for the jacket. He took something that he pawned off before. He took a gun." Oh fuck.
Yeah, so we cut back to Don. He's back at the apartment, and he's writing a letter of suicide there. So yeah, he's
Yep.
kind of getting his affairs in order because he has well, he has the plan that
Yeah.
he has obviously been formulating now since, well, at least since the beginning of the day. So he fixes his appearance in the mirror, and he's kind of getting everything in order. Then Helen lets herself back in, and she kind of runs over, and she's relieved to find he hasn't actually done it yet. So
Mhm.
he gives her his raincoat, and he's like, "Listen, just please leave." And she doesn't want to give away the fact that she knows he has this gun, so she's kind of casually trying to look around the apartment, trying to see where it is without actually letting him on the fact that she knows where she knows he has it.
Mhm.
And then she notices it in the reflection of the bathroom mirror. So she says, "Listen, do you actually want a drink?" And then she produces a whiskey bottle, and she's like, "Look, there's still a bit of drink in this." So he's like, "No, I don't want to drink."
Mhm.
She's like, "Please, just let me stay. We can just kind of have a little bit of a chat." And she says, "Look, I actually want to have a drink with you." And he's like, "No, I need to get I have some things to do before Wick comes back." And then she kind of just gives the game away. She's like, "Listen, I'd rather you be drink than be dead. Have a drink now
Mhm.
than be dead." Giving away the fact that she knows what he plans to do. Um, and then she seizes the gun. And unfortunately, straight away, he manages to seize it back off her. Like, he overpowers her. He kind of manhandles her a little bit without getting too violent or aggressive, but like, he does what he needs to do to get back possession of this gun. And she's just devastated. Obviously, she's kind of, yeah, she's devastated. He says, look, this is what's best for everyone. Everyone's going to be happier when this happens. He says, I can't just stop. I don't have any purpose. And she's like, please reconsider. He says no, but then just as they're having this kind of argument, and it's looking like things are about to go down a quite tragic path. Nat, the barman, he bangs on the door, and he says, listen, I found this down by the river. Turns out it's the briefcase with the typewriter. And Helen's like, well, this is a sign. Like, this is a sign from the universe. He's at the finding this typewriter that you lost. So that's the universe telling you that you still have options here. You still have this thing that you really love to do. Divine intervention. And she's like, listen, why don't you just sit down and start writing this novel, The Bottle, that you've been going on about. Document all your struggles. Document all the things that you feel. Document all the things that, like, you really just want to get out there. You can actually probably help people that are like you as well, that have this kind of illness. So Don smokes a cigarette, and then he picks up a drink, but he doesn't drink it. And then he kind of starts to act more jovial. It's like he's almost kind of come to a place of understanding, of peace, where he's like, I'm gonna write this. I'm gonna give one copy to Bim, the nurse. I'm gonna give one copy to the doctor whose jacket I stole. I'm gonna give a copy to Nat the barman. And he says, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sit down, document my whole weekend. The last weekend, obviously, 4-day bender. I'm going to document the whole weekend minute by minute, and then he's like, I wonder if there's actually loads more people out there like me. And yeah, that's the last weekend. Kind of ends in a more...
Camera then just comes back out the window, looking at the bottle, and then looks at the big open city, as he says, yeah, I wonder if there's other people like me.
Yeah, so it's quite... ends in definitely a more positive, optimistic note than basically the entire rest of the film, obviously.
Yeah, I'll be honest, ending's a bit rushed.
It is a bit rushed, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, bit rushed, not gonna lie. But overall, I definitely did enjoy this. I really liked this movie. I gave it 3.5 stars because, yeah, it's safe to say, Billy Wilder, very versatile writer, director, and not all his films have to be hilarious. It is safe to say. The guy wrote a pretty dark, grisly film about a guy who, yeah, does some pretty terrible things and some messed up things, particularly regarding like the feelings of the people around him. But he does manage to tie up the ending. But yeah, as I said, I do feel the ending is maybe a bit rushed. I don't know. That whole last sequence could have gone on a bit longer, I think. But that being said, I really enjoyed the movie. I think Ray Milland is really good in this movie, and as I said already, the score is a big bonus for me as well. I think the score is fantastic in this. What about you, Shane? You are the Billy Wilder expert of the podcast.
Yeah, I really like this. Without getting into the kind of stuff too much here, going too deep in the weeds, like I definitely can understand certain characters in this film, and like they just kind of the hopelessness that they feel. So yeah, it definitely kind of strikes an emotional chord with me, and I think a lot of other people out there. It's quite like you can understand why the Oscars would look at a film like this and like shower it with nominations and awards, because it's quite an Oscar baity film. But it's not actually made as Oscar bait, like you said. It's Billy Wilder just kind of exercising his own feelings about this kind of this topic.
Yes, exactly.
Wilder and Charles Brackett. And I have to say, the performance from Ray Milland is, I really, really love it. Look, it's portrays, when I say drunk acting, I don't mean someone who is drunk in that particular moment. I just mean someone who is an alcoholic who literally lives. They cannot go without drink. Like, to me, it's so realistic and so like well observed, and just his body language, his kind of the way he moves his body. It's almost like lizard like. It's almost reptilian at times. He does some really, really fucked up things in this film, like some really villainous things, some really just self-centered, selfish things, and I wouldn't say that I always root for him, but you can always there's always just that little tinge of sympathy for the guy, even though he does some messed up things and he does some really horrible
Yeah.
things. You still never quite you never completely loses me. I'll say that. So from that point of view, I think it's a pretty incredible performance from a leading man. The score from Miklos Rosa, like you said, it really kind of gives the film just a really kind of sad and tragic and just like dark vibe throughout. Like it does a great job of just adding to the kind of atmosphere of the whole piece. It doesn't rely on dialogue in the same way, obviously, especially doesn't rely on kind of the witty kind of remarks and the comedy, even like Double Indemnity, which is like also a crime thriller. Basically, it's a noir, obviously a crime thriller. Even that had kind of some very funny throwaway remarks, whereas this, like, I don't think there's a single line designed for laughs. It's just one big mood piece about these kind of people who struggle with alcoholism. So yeah, I definitely identify with a lot of it, and I think it's a pretty strong Best Picture winner. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 both times I saw it, and I think it definitely achieves what it sets out to achieve.
Yeah, and as far as Billy Wilder goes, we've really covered a good portion of his filmography on the podcast, just given how many episodes we've done. So obviously, for those of you who are wondering, we've also covered The Apartment on the podcast. We have covered Stalag 17. We have covered Double Indemnity.
He also co-wrote, him and Charles Brackett, who wrote this film, also co-wrote
Yes.
Ball of Fire that we covered just a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
So didn't direct that, but they did co-write it, and obviously, yeah, I think you'd know even without seeing the credit, I think you'd know that Billy Wilder was involved in the writing of that film.
Yeah, massively. And yeah, we still haven't covered Some Like It Hot or Sunset Boulevard, but I think it's probably safe to assume we'll cover them at some point. But in the meantime, yeah, we haven't done it in a couple of weeks now, but it's just safe to say that neither myself or Shane have really had a chance to watch many movies recently. I watched Zulu, which is good. That's all I got. I'm sorry.
I have nothing.
But
I have nothing.
yeah. No, we just haven't really had a chance to watch many movies recently. But yeah, in the meantime, next week we are covering On the Waterfront. I haven't seen that movie in so long. You've never seen it before.
I've never seen it.
One thing I do remember is, of course, Marlon Brando's performance, and it is his first time on the podcast, which is very exciting. But yeah, in the meantime, that, as you said, was episode 37 of the podcast.
47.
No, 47. Holy fuck. That was episode 47 of the podcast. The last weekend. And next week, yeah, On the Waterfront. But in the meantime, thank you very much. I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Mahoney.
And we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.